viewers, this is your host Radhika Tandon and welcome on today's show where we'll be discussing some of the prominent news stories from across Asia. Let's have a look at our first story from the dawn. Trump frustrated with stalemate in Afghanistan. The United States of America is preparing to undertake a review of its strategy in Afghanistan, a year after President Donald Trump reluctantly agreed to extend America's involvement in the 17-year-old war. According to officials, Trump had shown signs of frustration over the lack of progress since he unveiled a strategy last August that committed to an open-ended deployment of military advisors, trainers and special forces and increased air support for Afghan security forces. The goal was to force the Taliban to open peace talks with the Kabul government. Trump was opposed to remaining in America's longest war, but was convinced by his advisors to give it more time. Last year, he authorized the deployment of an additional 3,000 U.S. troops, bringing the total to around 15,000. Nearly a year later, the current situation is in a stalemate in which Afghan civilians are paying a heavy toll. The Taliban are expanding in rural areas but are unable to capture major urban centers, and the capability of Afghan security forces remains in doubt. Several current U.S. officials and other former officials and advisors with direct knowledge said the White House had not yet formally ordered the review, but they were preparing for a government-wide appraisal in the next few months. The review would examine all facets of the current strategy, including what progresses had been made, the U.S. troops' presence and prospect of negotiations with the Taliban. It also would include U.S. relations with Pakistan, which U.S. officials accuse of supporting the insurgents. U.S.-led forces invaded Afghanistan in 2001 to topple the Taliban government, alleging that they were harboring al-Qaeda. Since then, nearly 1,900 U.S. troops have been killed in the war, even as corruption remains endemic in the country and security remains precarious. A recent U.S. government watchdog report found that the Afghan government controlled or influenced only 56% of the country. Trump has vented over the lack of progress in Afghanistan. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, on a surprise visit to Afghanistan, promised support for President Ashraf Ghani's bid to start peace talks with the Taliban and repeated the United States would be willing to take part. Moving on to our next story from the Indian Express. Senior Pakistan leader among 20 killed in suicide blast at poll rally. 20 people, including Awami National Party leader Haroon Bilor, were killed and over 30 others were injured in a suicide attacking targeting an election gathering in Pakistan's northwestern Peshawar city. The blast took place shortly before midnight when Bilor, along with ANP workers, had gathered for a corner meeting in the congested Yakatut area. The death toll was initially reported at 13, but it rose to 20 overnight. Fireworks were being burst as the ANP candidate from PK78 constituency arrived on the stage when the suicide bomber blew himself up. Bilor suffered serious injuries and was shifted to a hospital where he succumbed to the wounds. The attack came hours after the military said it would deploy more than 370,000 security forces to polling stations to ensure free, fair and transparent national elections on 25th July. The ANP governed the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, of which Peshawar is the capital, from 2008 to 2013. The military waged a major offensive against militants in the Swat Valley in 2009. Islamic extremists killed hundreds of ANP leaders and supporters in attacks around the 2013 elections. A suicide bomber killed Bilor's father, Bashir Ahmad Bilor, during a meeting in 2012 ahead of the vote. This is the second terrorist attack on an election rally in Pakistan ahead of the July 25th general election. Earlier in July, 7 people at a gathering of religious parties were injured in an explosion during an election rally near Takhti Khel. Pakistani senior politicians and officials condemned the suicide attacks, saying the government failed to provide proper security to the party. All the violence has ebbed in Pakistan in recent years. Following offensives by the army in rebel strongholds in the northwest, many fighters have escaped to Afghanistan, from where Pakistan claims they launch attacks across the border. Moving on to our next story from the Tribune. Armed with MSP, Modi hits out. Accusing the Congress of betraying farmers and using them as a mere vote bank, Prime Minister of India Narendra Modi lashed out at the anti-farmer policies of successive Congress governments at the centre. Addressing a massive farmers' rally, the first after the BJP-led NDA government announced a substantial hike in the minimum support price of various crops, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said his government had redeemed its promise to the farmers. Modi asked the people to question the Congress government as to why Punjab trailed other states in ease of doing business, as per the World Bank report, even as he congratulated the ML Khattar-led BJP government in Haryana for being ranked third. Each time Prime Minister Modi spoke in Punjabi, a wave of excitement ran through the crowds. Prime Minister Modi said that the Congress is protecting and working for just one family. The BJP-led policies are making them restive as they have raised the MSP for crops. This will benefit farmers cultivating land on lease, as the BJP government is developing varieties of seed, taking steps to improve soil health and ensure better marketing, describing the rally as a farmers' kumbh. Expressing concern over stubble burning, the centre is also finding ways to ensure the farmers were not compelled to burn agricultural residue. Moving on to our next story from the Asian Age. Kids lost weight but took care of themselves in cave. The soccer teammates rescued from a flooded cave in Thailand lost weight during their 18-day ordeal but had water while they were trapped and are in good health. The 12 boys and coach rescued over 3 previous days took care of themselves well in the cave. 4 boys rescued can eat normal food and walk around, while the other 4 were eating soft food. Tong Chai said one member of the final group of 4 boys and the coach who arrived at the hospital had a slight lung infection. 2 of the first group had a lung infection as well. The average weight loss was 2 kilograms for those with known inflammation, and they were able to obtain water dripping inside the cave. The group had entered the sprawling Tham Luang cave to go exploring after soccer practice on June 23rd. But monsoon rains soon filled the tight passageways, blocking their escape. After a span of 10 days, they were found by a pair of British divers huddled on a small, dry shelf just above the water, smiling with relief but visibly skinny. The complex, high-risk mission for international and Thai divers to guide the boys and coach through the cave's flooded and tight passageways had riveted people worldwide. Highlighting the dangers, a former Thai Navy SEAL volunteering to work on the rescue efforts died while replenishing oxygen canisters that were placed along the escape route. Each of the boys aged 11 to 16 and with no diving experience was guided out by a pair of divers through rocky, muddy and water passages that in places were just a crawl space. The method was extremely risky, but dwindling oxygen levels in the cave and fears of more monsoon rains to come made a decision urgent. The boys were in isolation in the hospital to prevent infections by outsiders, but family members have seen at least some of the boys from behind a glass barrier, and after a period of time with no problems, the family members would be allowed closer while dressed in sterilized clothing. According to health officials, the boys would get a mental health evaluation to address any problems caused by their ordeal, and the group identity of the soccer teammates and their youth would aid their ability to recover with a faster pace. Heading to our last story from the midday. Sri Lanka government approves capital punishment for drug offences. The Sri Lankan cabinet has unanimously approved a motion to bring back capital punishment for drug-related crimes, paving way for the resumption of the death penalty after nearly 40 years. Minister Pereira said the Cabinet of Ministers had taken a collective decision to impose the death sentence, considering the recent rise in drug-related murders and a large amount of drug imports planned by drug traffickers who were already in prison custody. The Sri Lankan government recently said that the island country had become a transit point for major drug cartels as a consequence of the prolonged illegal activities of the Tamil Tiger rebels, who were militarily defeated by government troops in May 2009 following a 30-year civil conflict. Last week, Sri Lanka's Police Narcotics Bureau seized 103.9 kilos of heroin worth $7.5 million in one of the department's biggest drug busts ever. In 2016, Sri Lanka's Police Narcotics Bureau detected over 900 kilograms of cocaine from an Indian-bound ship, which was docked at the Colombo port. This haul was the largest cocaine seizure recorded in South Asia with an estimated value of $76 million. Although capital punishment is in the regulation, Sri Lanka had stopped hanging since 1976. Death row prisoners spend life terms in jail. Executions have not been carried out in Sri Lanka as successive presidents in office since 1978 have refused to issue death warrants. Well, that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching.